Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. I hope you've been hearing that a lot lately because we've been doing previews of each player's 2025 season basically every day. And so it feels like we've been talking a lot, but it has been a while since we've gone live. And so, on behalf of my co host, Saur, welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue for a full episode. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the US Open Cup, the preseason, and a couple of the happenings around Inter Miami. But for now, Saur, my friend, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. The weekend's been nice. The weather started to be not that cold here in Washington, D.C., so I'm feeling good. It's not pleasant when there's such a big gap between two games, so it almost feels like we got a nice teaser. We got into the
It
good,
is.
mood. We were ready to get into Miami, and then they left us hanging for another 10 days. So it doesn't feel great not having any game. And honestly, I am more than ready to now start talking about games back to back to back and not having to do filler episodes where we talk about things in and around Inter Miami, as much as I love doing that. So bring the games on as soon as possible, man, because that's what we're here for. That's what we're waiting for. How are you doing?
Good. I completely understand where you're coming from. And while I like doing the filler episodes and thinking about things from a different perspective and talking about some of the nitty gritty, I felt like this huge wave of energy coming into that first game. And it was like, okay, this is awesome. I'm so ready for the season. Let's get into it. I'm ready for 2 games a week for the next month and a half. And then it was nothing for a week and a half. And here we are, 8 days since the last Inter Miami game. You're absolutely right. It felt like a teaser. And then we kind of had to wait for the full movie to come out. That feels like it's going to start this week. On Wednesday, Inter Miami will take on Universitario in Peru. Big game down in South America. Huge fan base expected. Then they're going to go down to Panama on Sunday. So, and then they have the Honduras game in the next midweek. So it is going to come quick and fast. This feels like the heart of the preseason. That first game, early, fun, exciting, but there was just such a huge gap, and it was so early into training camp that I don't know how much we actually got to see. That Orlando City game is going to feel, I think, more ceremonial, low key, as we are 4 days before the first regular season game. And so this feels like the heart of preseason, and that is something I'm very excited about, and that is what I want to talk about today. But first, let's get into some of the little things. Official. Emerson Rodriguez leaves the club again, this time for good. For those that don't remember Emerson Rodriguez, you can be forgiven because it has been quite some time since he donned the pink and black. He was a U22 from Colombia, very pacey winger. I think lacked some of the technical refinement that you wanted and lacked some of the game awareness that you wanted from a player at this level. And so after a season under Phil Neville in 2022, where he was mostly a bench player, he goes on loan in 2023 to Santos Laguna. They decide not to buy him. Excuse me. Then he goes on loan to Millonarios, where he came from. That doesn't work out. He goes on loan to Vasco da Gama. That ends early, and now finally he's going to Hungary. Ludogorets Razgav, one of the biggest clubs in Hungary. So I think a good transfer for Emerson. I think he lands on his feet. I do think, if you've been paying attention a little bit, which I've been trying to, he has stepped up his game from loan to loan. I think that Santos Laguna loan was kind of not that impressive, but he earned that Vasco da Gama move in Colombia, and then the Vasco da Gama time, I think he played okay enough to earn this move to Hungary. So Emerson, gone forever. Any final words?
It feels like we ever so often, every 3 months, mention Emerson Rodriguez, and then we realize he's still an Inter Miami player. It's been a journey and a half for him. It didn't pan out the way it was supposed to at Inter Miami, which just goes to show that you may have rough diamonds in your mind, but you have to actually unearth them properly and actually be able to nurture them into good players. We got a fair few young players coming through with Diego Gomez, Benjamin Kramaski, Yannick Bright, all those great players that we have now. And then sometimes you have someone like Emerson Rodriguez, who had a lot of potential, but just didn't pan out for Inter Miami, which is fine. It happens. I'm just glad that after a stop-start season, after, going on loan, then coming back, then going on loan, then going on loan again, and then finally he's able to get his permanent move, because as a player as well, it must be really frustrating not having that one team to fully associate yourself with, and you don't really know how your future is going to play out in the next 6 months and the next year. So happy that he got his move. And as you mentioned, the team in Hungary is a good team by all means. He's getting his move to Europe, and hopefully he has a successful career there. Hopefully he's actually able to show off his talent, and wish him all the best for the future.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts on this, and maybe we shouldn't spend too long on this because potentially no one knows what we're talking about or about the player we're talking about. But first off, I remember last year he came back to training camp in the preseason for one day, and he gets his picture with Messi. He gets to meet Messi, and then he was gone the very next day. And I thought to myself, did he come back just to say, "Hey, listen, I'm coming back from loan. Let me do one training day with Messi just to get to meet him,"
Yeah.
or was it Tata Martino saying, "I saw one day of him, and that was enough. We can move on." Hard to say, but Javier Mascherano not going to get that opportunity. And then my second thought was Inter Miami with Chris Henderson and Tata Martino tried to sell this player previously every time he's been back, and they haven't been able to, only been able to get him out on loan, which was necessary because of the U22 designation. It was clear he was never going to come back and be a part of this team. But when you're talking about going on loan consistently, you want to get the transfer fee that helps you recoup some of the amount of money you spent on him, or at least help you in the allocation money world. I think there's a chance, I think pretty likely chance that Raul Sanyehi and Javier Mascherano just said, forget getting our transfer fee back, just get this guy off so we never have to think about him again. So I think it's likely Inter Miami lowered their demands to make this happen. And that's what ended up happening. Emerson goes to Ludogorets, and hopefully he has, a lot of fun times in Hungary.
Yeah, I was going to ask if we made a profit on him, but that's clearly not the case. So, and at this point in time, that's not what we're thinking about. Again, it's what could have been. High hopes for him, just didn't work out for us. And hopefully, again, he can kickstart his career in Hungary and have a good time playing football there in Europe.
Okay. Speaking of former Herons that are on to potentially bigger and better
I know
things,
where you're getting at.
Let's talk about Tata Martino, because he was recently linked to the Botafogo job, which is in Brazil. Part of the reason he left Inter Miami, according to him, was that he had some things he had to take care of in Argentina, and that was going to take him away from the game. And he wasn't sure if he was going to retire, but he thought he was going to step away from soccer for a while. This is, I think, evidence that says that Tata Martino leaving Inter Miami wasn't 100% Tata Martino's choice for those personal reasons that he talked about. Already potentially back in the game, not in Argentina, but in Brazil. So I think this just goes to confirm what we thought, what we talked about the minute this happened. I remember going live and talking with you guys about it. It felt like the time was up for Tata Martino at Inter Miami, and it was time for something new. And so here we are. Can we just put that to bed now that that's what happened?
Yeah, I'm going to very quickly. I was very surprised when I heard this news. He was very clear about the fact that he doesn't want to manage any other team for another year because he has family commitments that he needs to take care of. And that was given as the justification for Tata Martino leaving. The club was very, very clear in the fact that they wanted him to stay. And it seems like it was Tata Martino's decision to take a step back from the game itself. So this is very contradictory to exactly what was said when he left the club. I completely agree with you. I think there's a lot more behind this than we were told and what we were shown in the media, in the public. I feel like it was time for Tata Martino to go. And given the ambitions that the club had, we saw last season and we were like, not happy with this. We need more. We can take a step up in terms of coaching as well. And they asked Tata Martino to leave, and they wanted to part ways with him in an amicable manner. So they allowed him to save face almost by saying he's taking this decision by taking a step back. So very peculiar. Well, I hope if he still wants to manage and if he sorted out whatever family issues he had, it'd be really nice to see him get a coaching job with Botafogo and reunite with some of our players, namely Gregory.
Yeah, he would. Well, he never really coached. I guess he coached Gregory for a game or two.
But Preseason, I remember Gregory had that shot from outside the box that he hit the post. I still remember that.
Yeah, and he
And
played in that
Taka Martino's
those
goals.
2 Charlotte games at the end of 2023.
And
Anyways,
also, Botafogo is the Copa Libertadores champions as well, right?
they are so big club. They're going to the Club
Yeah.
World Cup. It would be a prestigious thing, and I think that's why they're going after sort of a big name manager. Remember, he came to Inter Miami as a big name manager, guy that coached at Barcelona, coached big stars, and so that same thing the same recognition that we saw in him, I would imagine other teams are going to see the same thing. So it wouldn't surprise me if he gets that type of job. Okay, speaking of former Herons, let's get to another one. Matias Rojas scores his first goal for River Plate last night, and apparently it was a banger. Congratulations to him. Do you wish we still had Matias Rojas now that we know we're going to play at least some of the time with Messi centrally and a player to his right? Because if we had seen that last year, it could have been really exciting.
Didn't take him long, did it, to stamp his name on the River Plate team? Good for him. Honestly, he's a brilliant player who, in the right environment, would absolutely thrive. And yes, I would really like him back in the team, but I feel like we are moving in a different direction. And there was clearly conversation about keeping him on, and it didn't work out for all the parties. So I'm just going to say, yes, brilliant player, but we got to move on, look to the future. Good for him for scoring his first goal. Congratulations. And hopefully he can score a few more. I'm going to miss his long ranges.
Yeah, same. And then the last thing I think we should at least touch on is that Inter Miami did acquire another international roster slot from Portland. So I think that brings them up to 12. I think they need 13 with the roster they have now. I'm projecting they're probably going to need 15 or 16 once this roster gets completed, because I do think they want to bring in another striker who I don't think is going to be American. And I think they have another roster slot to fill that was opened by Facundo Farias. We thought that it was going to be Baltasar Rodriguez. It wasn't. And so that spot is still another player that they might try and fill the roster with. So, and then if you're talking about moving to Julian Gressel or whoever else might move from the roster, and I don't even want to, make that say names right now, because we're getting close to the point where we can, I think, lock in this team comfortably for at least potentially them all being here. 12 spots in, you need one more. They're going to get it soon. Like we talked about this at the end of the last signing with Maxi Falcone. The roster can start the season now. We're getting to the point where the roster rules are, we can start the season based on the roster rules. So another, check mark that we had to get done, and they've got it done now.
Yeah, all that GAM coming to some use at least. And this was bound to happen. It was needed to happen for us to actually have registered all our players. So it feels like the team's coming together. One more and nothing more to add on this. I'm glad that the backroom staff is actually doing their work behind the scenes, because an important part of this is obviously getting in players, finding players, scouting players, but also making sure we're sticking to the rules and adjusting accordingly. So everything seems to be functioning well. We had a lot of concerns about Raul Sanyehi and Javier Mascherano being able to handle their transfer window well. Seems like they had a good grip on it, whatever it was. Looks like they're reading off of the Chris Henderson playbook. And thus far, I have absolutely no complaints. And there's still a long way to go until April. The transfer window is going to be open. So it may look like the rumors have died down a little bit, but there's still room for us to make additions. I'm sure they're working now on the outgoings aspect of it, because that's also an important aspect of the squad building. So we'll see. I'm sure the rumors are going to start picking up soon. I do expect a couple more players to come in soon.
I'm going to push back on that personally. I think they can start the season like this and feel fine with it.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. But I
So-
don't think this is the end of it. I think they're going to bring in more. That's what I was trying to get.
Yeah, that's fair. But again, like I don't think that means we're going to get another player in the next week. We told you guys 3 weeks ago, it's coming fast and heavy. Now they brought in 5 or 6 guys, and they're here now, and it doesn't really need to come fast and heavy anymore. It could. I think there's room for another striker. I think you could. They wanted to bring in Baltasar Rodriguez, who's sort of a 10 floating winger type player. They might go out and try and get someone else like that. They might still try and get Baltasar Rodriguez, but so like there's some pieces that could be acquired, but they're comfortable, I think, going into game one like this.
And it'll be additional. And I don't think there's any more first team players who are going to be brought in. I think the first team squad, at least the first 11, sorry, are already in place. The starting 11 is in place. Everyone who comes now is potentially going to be a backup or a depth piece. But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. Inter Miami has a tendency to surprise us from time to time. So I won't be averse to a nice big signing either.
Okay. 2 topics for today, main topics, the US Open Cup and what we want to see from the preseason. What do you want to go with first?
Let's do the US Open Cup so that then we can talk about the preseason and what we want to see from it.
You want to get back to ball.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get back to ball in the US Open Cup with Inter Miami, and there's some conflicting rumors about exactly in what shape that is going to happen. The US Open Cup finally finished their planning for the season. 16 MLS teams, we can say with confidence, are going to participate, and 10 MLS Pro teams, which means that of the 27 American teams in MLS, only one of them will sit out in its entirety. I would imagine that San Diego FC, who is just building their first roster, definitely doesn't have the depth to really compete on multiple fronts. That's understandable. And what that would imply, if it is San Diego, is that every other MLS team is either going to participate fully or going to participate with their B team. And I would love to see Inter Miami compete with their A team, but I have a feeling we're going to end up with the B team. I did see some reporting that it's going to not, that Inter Miami's A team is not going to participate. I think that makes a lot of sense when you look at the calendar. But I got a little hope because I do think some people Friday night were talking about how Inter Miami's A team might be in that competition. And so while we wait final word, even though it's probably definitely no, I think it's at least cool that Inter Miami's back in the Open Cup in some way. And if the B team does participate, I'll be watching the games.
Yeah, I think this was one of those where I thought earlier in the week that Inter Miami is actually back in the US Open Cup, and I felt good about it. I'm happy. More games, good for us, but also, of course, we're in the Club World Cup. We have a fair few games this season to play, so it can take a toll on the roster. But overall, I would have really enjoyed to see Inter Miami's A team back in the US Open Cup. Just means there's one more cup for us to compete for and win potentially. If it doesn't happen, and if the rumors are true that Inter Miami is only going to be playing their B team, that's fine. I can understand that. Takes a load off the players. It's better for squad management for sure. But I think it's a great chance for our B team to actually show up and show what they're capable of. We have a couple of players in our B team who we are looking out for. Of course, we've got Destin, we've got Ryan Carmichael, and it's a great opportunity for them to play against some good teams and test themselves and get some experience on the pitch. So whatever said and done, I hope Inter Miami is one of those 27 teams. I'm sure they're going to be. That doesn't seem to be a reason why not. So I'm really excited to see them back in the US Open Cup. It's just going to matter on how that iteration is, whether it's the A team who's playing or the B team. Either ways, it's fun.
Yeah, and for those asking, why do you care about the Open Cup when we have so many games? The way the MLS calendar sets out is makes you uniquely capable of competing on all fronts if you have the bodies to do it, because the final stages of each tournament come at different points in the season. Yes, you might have to play one US Open Cup game during the CONCACAF Champions Cup run, but for the most part, all of your US Open Cup games would be after the CONCACAF Champions Cup concludes and before the Leagues Cup really gets going. So if you are an MLS team and you have the type of depth that can play 2 games a week, which Inter Miami, I think, does, even though the second string isn't as good as the first string, I think they have 11 guys that they can play two separate 11s that you can feel comfortable with. So I think I would love to be in the US Open Cup. And then the other thing about it is, if you don't win the CONCACAF Champions Cup, all of a sudden you're like, this season is in a bad situation. We lost in the quarterfinals last year to Monterrey. We did not have a chance to make up for it until the Leagues Cup, and then we failed there. So you're talking about falling out of the CONCACAF Champions Cup in April, and then not having a chance to really make up for it until MLS Cup in early December, late November. So having the US Open Cup in there is a great way to make up for a potential failure somewhere else. And if you keep going deep into the CONCACAF Champions Cup and you're making a good run at the title, you can play your backups and hope they can, get through a B team or a USL team or whatever and get you through to the later stages where, again, you get into that middle part of the season where, you're only playing MLS games. And so I think that would be really fun. And also I think a true treble this is just me personally thinking, the league winner, the National Cup winner, and the Confederations Cup for the continent. So that would imply winning the U.S. Open Cup more so than the Leagues Cup. A true treble, in my opinion. But
yeah, and
I'm weird like that.
I'll say these players are professionals. They're used to playing 2 games a week. I think that's a standard now in every league of the world. So I won't be too averse to them playing those extra games. And there's also a case to be made that our team is so full of competent players. There's so much competition, especially in the midfield. Having those extra games not only keeps your second string team fresh, players who are going to get lesser minutes perhaps, keep them fresh, but also compete for those spots. Because if someone performs really well in a US Open Cup game, I can totally see someone like a Benjamin Kramaski getting regular starts in the US Open Cup. You find his ideal role on the team. You're able to determine what his best spot is. He shows something really, really important. And then towards the latter half of the season, we can actually use him as a first team player. So it gives the opportunity to some of these peripheral players to actually stake a claim on the starting 11. And I think that's really good when you have so much competition in your first team. And as you mentioned, it's really disheartening when you get knocked out of a cup early. So the fact that you then have something to compete for, we saw that with the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Got knocked out early. We had to wait until the Leagues Cup to actually be able to say we're now in another competition to be able to compete for something. Got knocked out of that, and then the only thing that was remaining was the MLS Cup. So having that US Open Cup marker to compete for as well will be a good signpost for us to actually stake a claim towards the domestic treble, or the true treble, as you may call it.
Well, and that's just my own personal preference, but
no, for sure,
cool. And also,
that is the definition of a treble.
We got so close in 2023. I mean, it was right there, and Messi got injured, and we couldn't come up with what we needed against Houston, and that was heartbreaking. But that U.S. Open Cup semifinal is still my favorite game ever as an Inter Miami fan, and so I think I have a soft spot in my heart for the U.S. Open Cup. Watching that run that year was the only good thing about the 2023 season up until Messi arrived, and so that late equalizer for Borgelin and Kramaski having a big goal, and Nico Stefanelli helping us beat Nashville in the rain after the rain, like all of these big moments that helped us win and survive and advance in the 2023 Open Cup are some of the moments from the first half of that season that meant the most to me. And so, and then clearly that Messi to Campana equalizer late in the semifinal was incredible. So I have a soft spot in my heart for the tournament. I would love to see us be not just in it, but win it. And like you said, I think that Inter Miami has the depth for it. Guys like Kramaski, Redondo, David Ruiz,
Yannick
Robert
Wright,
Taylor,
Afonso.
Afonso. I think Yannick Bright's in our first 11, but that's David Martinez, Gonzalo Lujan, Noah Allen. Like all of these guys can win you MLS games. They can certainly win you US Open Cup games without causing too much stress and trouble. And we've been doing these preseason previews. Ian Frey, another one. Thank you, Gus. We've been doing these preseason previews, and with a couple of the younger guys, we talk about, they got 1,200 minutes last year, but I would have liked to see them get 1,700. That's the U.S. Open Cup right there, is what gets you those extra games. And so we'll see how, Tadeo Allende and Tasco Segovia come in and fit into the MLS. But if they're great, that just means the guys they're replacing aren't getting as many minutes as they deserve. And if they're not as good, then that U.S. Open Cup is an awesome opportunity to help them sort of bet into the MLS roster, so that by the time you get to the playoffs, everyone knows their role. Everyone is very excited. You've had
everyone's
even more
ready
opportunity to test and teeter.
Yeah,
So
and I think it also keeps everyone ready and fresh, because if someone needs to come in, for instance, Noah Allen needs to come in and do a job if one of our defenders gets injured, he's already got game time. He doesn't have to take time to embed himself back into some minutes. So, yeah, overall, it should be positive. Let's see what happens for Inter Miami. I hope we're one of the 16 teams, but conflicting
yeah,
reports for now.
and listen, you should assume we're not going to be in. I think
Yeah.
Jose Armando reported that, but there was some contradictory information being put out on Friday night. So I will wait for official word from the U.S. Open Cup or from Inter Miami. I would expect not to be, but that's okay. And I think if you look at the schedule this particular season, you can understand why Inter Miami wouldn't be a participant with the Club World Cup smacked into the middle of the calendar, which
Yeah.
most teams don't have. They changed the rules, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago when they had this new rule infrastructure brought into the MLS. Was how does some of these ancillary rules impact the MLS, impact Inter Miami? And we talked about the big ones with the transfer window or internal transfer market. But one of the things we mentioned was this rule allowing younger players to join the A team for games that aren't MLS games in an unlimited fashion. So you're talking about the U.S. Open Cup, and you need minutes for everyone, but you don't have a backup striker. Like, then you can bring up someone from the B team to be that backup striker. So it felt like the MLS was moving in this direction, and it just feels like Miami is going to be the last team to get there. I don't think that the owners care that much about this tournament, unlike I think a lot of owners in the MLS do. So I think Inter Miami will be sort of the last team back in this tournament, but it feels like the B team at least is going to participate this year.
Hopefully next year. We'll see. Let's not jump to conclusions yet, because, hey, and you know what? We can maybe win it with our B team. Okay, maybe not. That's a bit too much of a pipe dream. But yeah.
Well, the B teams, some part B teams participated last year and they did not do particularly well. So I will put that out there.
I'm not surprised.
There was some thought that maybe as you got later into the tournament, some of the B teams would sort of field a couple of the 18 players to help them compete. But that didn't really happen, and I don't think any of the B teams really made it far enough for that to be a relevant conversation.
You know what? I think Sergio Busquets is going to struggle for minutes this season, so maybe we should push him into the B team and play in the U.S. Open Cup.
I have one more thing about the U.S. Open Cup. Anyways, let's talk about the preseason. We mentioned at the beginning, we got the teaser, and it was a beautiful teaser. High energy, very exciting. The game was fun. The way the game unfolded was fun. The pregame show with you all was really fun. The postgame show with you all was really fun. Like, I was so high energy after that whole experience, and then we get a long break. Now on Wednesday, it feels like we're going to start ramping up again. We're going to play Universitario in Peru, and I'm really excited. So let's spend the rest of the show talking about what we want to see from Inter Miami, from this roster, from Javier Mascherano over the next 3 games, because this is the heart of the preseason.
Let's start with the players. I want to see more of what we saw in the first game in terms of the structure, the intensity, the way everyone was ready and fresh and looked sharp. I want more of that sharpness from all of the players. I want that same level of concentration and intensity, because it didn't look like a preseason game. And that was very surprising, very pleasantly surprising. I just don't want the levels to drop, because that would tell me, okay, maybe it was those one-off games where we came back. There was a lot of excitement in the squad to actually get back on the field. And, we ended the season with a bit of disappointment. So they wanted to go out and actually put on a good show for their fans. And if we sort of go back into that preseason slumber mode, I'd be a little bit disappointed. So in terms of the sharpness, the pace at which the game is played, the tempo, how they're approaching it with the intensity, I want the same of it. Doesn't have to be more. I want the same of it, because that would tell me the team is in a good mindset, at least to start with.
Yeah, and I think the environment made a difference in a positive way in terms of the energy and the atmosphere, bringing energy out of the players and that kicking them into a good rhythm. Last year, I remember those first 2 games in El Salvador and in the Cotton Bowl. It was a cold day at the Cotton Bowl. It was against kind of a boring FC Dallas team. the game against El Salvador. Sometimes they can really get up, but they weren't really that up for it in that game in terms of the crowd and the environment. It wasn't like what we saw in Saudi Arabia, where I think we took a huge step up in terms of our energy and our readiness and how hard we prepared, but maybe we went a little too hard. Now it feels like every game, other than maybe that Orlando City game, is going to feel very high energy, very important, at least in the beginning of the preseason. And I hope we can sort of get high quick and then ride that through that first part of the season, where we can get a few rounds of the CONCACAF Champions Cup under us and really get into that tournament before that energy sort of has to peter into mid-season form. So yeah, I love the energy. I loved how they came out. I loved the start. It was so much fun. And I know I've said that 4 times, but it was really, really an experience after talking about it all offseason.
Honestly, it wasn't just about the result either, because it was a 1-1 game and we ended up going to penalties. That was fine. It's not about the result. It's not about winning the game itself. And as Thomas mentions, we don't really care if we win the game. But the way with which we played the game was really positive. And yes, we didn't necessarily go all out attacking or blow Club America out of the water, but that's the level of opposition that we were up against. They had already started off their season. They were in good shape. They knew exactly what they wanted to do. They'd rested their first team players for this particular game, and we went almost toe-to-toe against them. Case can be made that we even deserved to win it towards the end. So I would say that overall, the way with which we played the game was more important and gave us a lot of positives to take away. And I just want to see that you set the tone for the rest of the season with how you prepare in the preseason. And it doesn't matter if we lose games, but you have to play with the right attitude and the mindset. And the first game showed me that the team had that. Now they just need to continue that and take that into the next game. Then the next game, batter Orlando with our B team, and then go into that Kansas City game with your full mindset ready to start the season.
Okay, we're going to do a little bit of research on Universitario before Wednesday's pregame show, but I think, and again, I haven't done it yet, so I may be wrong in what I'm about to say, but I think it's going to be a little bit of a step down in terms of the competition. I think Club America, the best, potentially most talented team in CONCACAF, other than Inter Miami, or right in that conversation, is a little bit higher level than Universitario. Could be wrong. We'll see. But I expect this to be more like a good MLS team than a top-tier CONCACAF team.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, I think it could look much more similar to how we face the better teams in MLS this season. And so I'm curious to see what Javier Mascherano is going to put together. And I think the level of competition is going to kind of gradually go downward. Maybe Olympia is better than San Miguelito, but you get the idea. So for this game, we're going to be, I think, trying to establish what we want to do in the regular season, as opposed to sitting back and trying to, put on a good show, but be defensively sound and try different things in the midfield with Messi. Like, I think that was a very specific game, and I'm curious to see if we repeat that formula or if Javier Mascherano is going to tinker and kind of play a different setup that we might see more in the regular season.
Yeah, I think during the first game, we saw a couple of different formations being used. The main one that I saw, I think you disagreed with that, but for me, the main formation was the 4-4-2. We sat back a little bit, kept in a mid-block, were mostly very compact, and then we tried to catch them on the break, play direct football out the back. We switched to a 4-2-3-1 once the subs came on as well, so that was a different shape a little bit. We became a little bit more expansive in our play, and then I saw a little bit of 4-3-3, 4-2-2, 4-4-2. So a mix of everything. I agree with you. I think this next game is going to be a little bit more expansive and adventurous from our side. We're going to try and take more initiative, have more of the ball as well. I think we lacked possession in that first game. This time I expect us to dominate possession. And in that sense, I don't necessarily think we're going to be sitting in a 4-4-2 mid-block. I do expect us to maybe play with a 4-2-3-1. Have Messi play as that number 10 role and Busquets feeding the ball into him. If that's the case, and if that's how we actually want to play in the majority of the games when we are the better team on the pitch, that's exactly how I would wish this game to be treated. If it's the 4-4-2 again, then I'll be... it depends how we play and what the situation looks like. But I want us to maybe try and dominate the game a little bit more and take charge of this game, set the tempo, set the pace. This is of the assumption that Universitario is a little less than Club America. So based on that assumption, I want us to dominate the game. But it could be either ways. We are playing away from home. It is going to be a very intense environment. The altitude is going to be definitely against us. So you never know how that plays out. But in terms of how we want to dominate the game and control the game, we should be the ones looking to take the initiative in the game to Universitario.
Yeah, and I think it's just are we going to try? Right? Like I think heading into that game against Club America, it's not even about the talent. I think we just went into that game thinking they're in better form. They've been in preseason for longer. They've already started the regular season. They're coming and going to have a home field advantage. And here we are, like in our first game, and last year our first game was not particularly impressive. So like we had very low expectations. I think Club America had high expectations. Going into this game, I think we should feel like we can come out and try and implant what we want to do on this game. And so you talk about what is it going to look like in possession if we do control possession much to a higher degree than we did in that last game. I think we're going to see if we want to do that. Right? Maybe that's not how Javier Mascherano wants to play. Maybe he wants to play quick counterattack style, play deep, be defensively sound, and then just let Messi and Suarez and the pacey wingers do what they're going to do going forward and create offense that way. But I think this game will tell us that, I think, in a way that the last game, was just one game and we might not have learned. I want to know what Javier Mascherano wants to do with this team. I guess that's what I keep trying to get back to. And we don't really know because we only faced one opponent. Do you think, personal opinion, do you think we're going to see something drastically different, or you think we're going to see something very similar?
I think we're going to see something fairly similar. When we talk about formations, it's not going to be a fixed formation by any means, but I think we're going to see something similar in that 4-4-2, 4-2-3-1 shape. Offensively 4-2-3-1 perhaps, defensively 4-4-2. I think it's going to be something related to that. It's going to be in and around it. Whether we sit in a mid block, whether we're a little bit more expansive, that's going to depend from game to game. I expect consistency. So I think there might be some tinkering around in terms of how we want to play the game, hold the ball more, control the ball more. But in terms of the formation, the setup, the instructions, it might be fairly similar. Again, this is a personal opinion, but I think we're going to start seeing a sort of blueprint with which Javier Mascherano wants to play in this game. May not give us the complete picture, but at least the silhouette is going to start forming from this game onwards. And will almost confirm whether that Club America game was a one-off or whether it was a actual coherent way in which we want to play moving forward. So I think we're going to see something similar, albeit a little bit tinkered.
This is Javier Mascherano's first club coaching job, and so we don't really know if he's a system coach yet.
Yeah,
there are different types of coaches, and one very strong archetype is you have a system and you implement it, and then you bring players in to fit that system. My guess is that he's not that type of coach. It's really almost impossible to do that at the national team level on a consistent basis, and so I doubt that's what he kind of implemented in Argentina. But maybe he did have that kind of thing in mind for when he does get a club job, and maybe he wants to implement that here. I don't think that's the right type of coach for Inter Miami at this point. And so I think if that's what he wanted to be, or that's what he wants to be, I'm not sure Inter Miami would have hired him. And so I think he's not that. I think he's a guy that's going to adjust what he wants to do based on the opponent, based on the talent he has available, based on the starting 11 he feels is best for that game. And so for me, I'm almost expecting something different. Maybe, still back four, maybe the formation looks similar, but I think the patterns of play might look very different. Last game, we tried to play very centrally, get the ball to Messi and let him either go out wide or go, stay centrally, play sort of in that mid block, but keep getting those offside traps and be very disciplined defensively. Keep your biggest focus on that instead of coming up to try and get, early tackles or early interceptions. That back line played much more, I would say, conservatively in that regard. And so I am curious, though, what does Jordi Alba's role look like? Is he going to get high up the pitch a lot? What are we going to get from Chelo Wigan? Are the fullback usage going to be a big aspect of Javier Mascherano's system when we do have more possession? These are all questions I'm very curious about. Are we going to see Messi on the right? Is Messi a central player now under Javier Mascherano? Is that just going to be his role? Or was that something that we tried out and we saw if it worked and it was good? I liked it. I thought it was interesting, but it's not like his locked in role. Like that, I also think is going to be an interesting conversation. And hopefully we learn a little bit about it this upcoming game.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The patterns of play, at least in the first game, looked very different from what we are normally used to. It wasn't as, possession based passing football, and we tried to go very direct. We tried to catch them on the counter attack, long balls as well. We weren't afraid to immediately pounce if we saw an opportunity. So that was promising. But I don't think we're going to do that against every single opposition. It's going to depend from game to game. So you might be actually right that Javier Mascherano isn't a systems coach, but I still think that I'm going to stick with my gut and say we're going to see a very similar pattern in terms of the setup. How we approach within that setup can maybe change. But we'll see. We'll see. Whatever said and done, as long as Javier Mascherano understands how he wants to play, who he wants in there, that's all that matters at the end of the day. But this is now, I think, the second step to try and figuring out his players, who he thinks fits where, what the role for each player is going to look like. And I think we're going to get a more definitive answer for that. I also think we're going to maybe see him starting to put out a more consistent lineup out there in the third or the fourth game, and we'll figure out who he actually prefers in his first starting 11. So if we see Yannick Bright in next game, I'll be actually really pleased with that, because that's going to tell me that he sees something that he saw in that first game from the Club America game. So personnel on the pitch is also going to be an interesting look to keep out for.
Yeah, and so that's where I want to go next. Who do you want to see? Because I think I would be kind of disappointed if we got the same 11.
Yeah, same.
It doesn't feel like a ton of the new players are going to be available. They're waiting on their work permits and everything to become official. Tadeo Allende, he apparently got it, but then the signature was wrong or something. So I'm not sure if he's available for this game. So it actually, even though we were expecting all these guys to be available, it might turn out that none of them are available.
Hey, Starry is available.
Ustari is available, and I think he'll start.
Yeah,
probably.
Segovia, we haven't heard.
Segovia doesn't have the permit as of recording. He might get it in the next couple days. Tadeo Allende, there was some confusion about it. Gonzalo Lujan, same thing. Maxi Falcone, same thing. Like all those deals are done. They're happening, but they aren't eligible to play for us yet or train with us yet. So
I think it's going to come through. I think it's going to come through in time.
Let's assume it doesn't for Wednesday night. Mm-hmm. The team is coming back to South Florida after every game, so it's not like if you miss the first flight, you're just going to miss the whole trip. If you miss it Wednesday, you can be available for Sunday. That's fine. But let's assume the same players are available for this upcoming game as last game, including Oscar Ustari. Who do you want to see start that maybe didn't get a chance to start last game?
I think Yannick Bright in there would be good to see. I want to see David Martinez in that back line as well. I want to start seeing him get some minutes. And if he's putting him next to Toto Aviles, that'll be an interesting combination for me. So I want to continue to see them grow. Who else is available? In the front line, I'm not sure who's available. I would like to see Fafa Pico start again, actually. So have him on that left wing side if possible.
So maybe it'll help if I give you some of the guys
that'd be useful.
That could be available.
Thank you.
Leo Afonso, Yannick Bright, Benjamin Kramaski back from international duty.
Okay, there you
go. David Martinez, who you mentioned. Ian Frey, probably not for game time decision, game time, play, but I think he'll be ready for the start of the season. I don't know. Now I'm forgetting everyone. David Ruiz. Okay,
that's about it. Yeah,
Oscar Ustari.
No, I think So Leo Afonso, I think Robert Taylor can maybe come on in the second half. I want to see Leo Afonso. We haven't seen him in a while, and
Julian Gressel.
He looked really good when he came on last game. I thought he was very sharp and very quick, and exactly what you'd expect Leo Afonso to be. So maybe give him the start and see what he does in that left wing. Fafa Pico on the other side, perhaps. Gressel maybe as well. There's a few options, but I think for me, the players that I want to see start are Yannick Bright, David Martinez, and perhaps Leo Afonso as well.
I think speed on the outside in those wide midfielders is going to be important. I think. We'll see. But if that's the case, I think Leo Alfonso can really earn a role. And I think that hurts Julian Gressel. I think Robert Taylor has it enough to be sort of dangerous. Obviously, Fafa Picault has it. I agree with you. I think Leo Alfonso would be really interesting to see him get real minutes to see what he can be. But you also want Fafa Picault to get more comfortable. And I think those two are probably competing at the same spot. Julian Gressel, how does he fit in? We saw him get the game tying assist against Club America. Like,
As
he's
captain.
still quality. We've never given up on him as a quality player. We just don't know how it fits into this rotation, especially last year. But now that we have that right side of midfielder, Julian Gressel feels like a player that now could have a real role on this team, which is not something we thought we were going to say up until that first game. So, we'll learn. We'll learn more about this setup. We'll learn more about Javier Mascherano, but also we can start projecting how the guys on the roster might fit into that. Julian Gressel is a player I'm very curious about.
Yeah, but that right-sided midfielder is only in a 4-4-2 setup. So again, the question is, how are we actually going to play that? Because otherwise, it's going to be a right winger, right? If it's a 4-2-3-1, it's a right winger.
Yeah, but the problem is Julian Gressel is a good right winger. He just couldn't play there if Lionel Messi was there.
Yeah.
So now that you move Lionel Messi out of that right wing spot, it opens up for a guy like Julian Gressel.
And the thing is, in games that you actually want to control and you want to keep the ball and have space to play around, I think he'll be fine. He'll be really good in that spot. And we haven't seen much of him with Lionel Messi on the pitch in that right wing role. We've always seen him centrally in the midfield with Messi on the pitch. So you're right. That actually is an avenue in which I can see him being a part of this team. But I see his role mostly when you have to control the game and the game pace is a little bit slower. When it's faster, even then I can actually see him fit in because he has a really good tendency of distributing the ball and spreading the ball out when necessary. Very good in transition. So maybe there is a role for him. I don't know if we're reading too much into Mascherano playing Messi centrally. Again, this game will likely give us a lot more insights into that. So one thing to keep an eye out for would be where Messi plays in this team. And that itself opens up the role for some of these other players like Julian Gressel. So, interesting observation. I don't think he starts tomorrow on Wednesday, but one to keep an eye out for in terms of when he's going to come on and what he's going to do.
Midfield. I think we're going to see Redondo and Busquets again.
Yeah, I think so
I think that's plan A for Mascherano.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think he's going to want to use the preseason to get them some chemistry. But listen, I remember watching that game and Yannick Bright had one of those characteristic steals. And I was just thinking, like, we haven't had one of these all game. And here it is, 3 minutes after Bright came on. I would like to see what Yannick Bright and Sergio Busquets look like in a midfield pairing. We didn't really get a chance to see it much last year because by the time Bright broke out, Busquets was sort of on the back line. That would make me excited, and I think it would show me that Mascherano is going to be pretty flexible with who he gives his minutes to early until they prove themselves.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's too early for Mascherano to give up on that pivot of Sergio Busquets and Federico Redondo. I think it'll be so good if Bright starts that game with Busquets in the middle, because for me, that's the perfect pairing that we can go for. If Messi's in front of them, that's brilliant. That's like the perfect midfield three. You have the number 10 unlocking everything, and you have the pivot of Bright and Sergio Busquets, with Busquets basically being a floating body who can go wherever he wants to. With Redondo, it gets a little bit more limited, but you're absolutely right. I think he's going to start Redondo and Busquets and see how much he can actually get out of that partnership before he tries new things.
I would like to see some of the new guy. I know I said we should assume they're not going to play, but if we do get Tadeo Allende and he starts on that right side, I'm very curious to see what he looks like.
Who are you most excited about, though, of the new signings that we've had so far?
Well, I've said consistently Velasco Segovia is my favorite new signing, but I'm actually okay waiting longer on him because I feel like the midfield is already deep and talented, so it's okay to not have him. Whereas if you get a Tadeo Allende that's a real weapon on that right side, that would be really cool. If you get a Gonzalo Lujan that's like really impressive as a right back, he might just be the new starting right back, right? So
I actually want to see Maxi Falcone. I'm really looking forward to seeing Maxi Falcone.
I think that he's the least likely to be available for Wednesday. So I've been putting him off to the side. But also I think he's going to come in as the number one starter. So I'm curious to see what it looks like, but I don't think it changes much about what our plans are for the early parts of the season. Whereas I think Allende and I think Gonzalo Lujan have a chance to, if they come in and really impress, earn some early minutes. And then if they don't, that means some of the guys we already have are going to get big minutes early, like Robert Taylor, Telo Wiegand, Fafa, etc. So that's how I'm feeling about that. But I really just want to see Telasco Segovia.
Yeah, that I think is the most exciting bit that we really want.
What about some of the young guys? We saw Santi Morales for a brief debut. Do you think we're going to get more of him this preseason? Tyler Hall, Zero Boatwright, a couple guys that didn't get a chance to play last year, but that are on the first team, should be practicing with the first team and should be ready to go.
We're probably going to see them get like 10, 15 minutes towards the end. But as more players come back and become available, like we now have Benjamin Kramaski coming back as well, who's going to demand some minutes. So once those new signings come in, they're probably going to get less and less minutes. So maybe in the next game, if we don't have some of the new signings in, I can see a couple of youngsters getting a run out. But I think it's going to get far and few as we move along the preseason, as we get more players on.
Yeah, I think they're going to be relegated to the last 5 minutes of the game.
Yeah.
Which is a shame, but also like that's probably an indication of what their role this year in the early first half of the season is going to be. And I think it would be telling if Tyler Hall doesn't get any minutes. He got some preseason minutes last year. Santi Morales getting some this year. So if Tyler Hall does get some, then you're like, okay, they're going to get some time this year. And if not, then that'll also tell you, maybe Israel Boatwright doesn't get any, which would be disappointing, but that would also tell you where the club thinks he's at right now. So interesting times ahead. Let's go forward to the next couple games because it is going to come fast and heavy. Game, and then we'll be sort of right into the season. I don't know how many times we're going to have an opportunity to just sit down and think big picture like this. So I want to fast forward a little bit to this San Miguelito game in Panama on Sunday. This feels like exactly what they're training for on the road in Jamaica when they have to go play Cavalier if they get through Sporting Kansas City. This feels like preparation for that game, but also it's a chance to play lower level competition. You can really dominate the ball, kind of express yourself, and we'll get a chance to see what this team can really do when they have a clear talent advantage.
This is where I would experiment a little bit, try out new things that Javier Mascherano hasn't seen in the first two games. New combinations, new players and positions. This is where I think
it's the opposite.
I would want to go a little bit experimental on this one because I think the opposition is decent enough that you can get away with trying new things. So why not?
See, I think it's the opposite. I think you use this as when we dominate 70% possession, this is what I want it to look like.
Yeah.
And I don't think you want to experience with that when you go into the regular season and you have similar games against Houston Dynamo or Philadelphia.
But you can still do that if you've got Sergio Busquets and Yannick Bright in the midfield rather than Sergio Busquets and Federico Redondo. So in that sense, I think when I say experimental, I mean not play like a 3 in the back and 5 men up top. I mean, move things around a little bit, try out a little bit new combinations in terms of the midfield combination, the backline combination, for instance. I think this might be the game that we actually see some of the newer players actually play. So you might see a Maxi Falcone or a David Martinez combination or a Maxi Falcone and a Toto Aviles combination. So that's what I mean by experimentation. But in terms of playing how you want to play, absolutely right. Dominate the ball and treat this as a game where you're the team that has the initiative and has to set the pace and go out and dominate possession.
Yeah, my apologies. I misunderstood what you meant. I do think this first 3 games line up nicely where you can go into that Club America game and think they're probably a little bit better than us based on where they're at in the season, and they have a lot of talent. Then you go into that Universitario game, you think we're on the road, but this is probably an even matchup. And then you go into that San Miguelito game and you think we are the heavy favorites. And I think you can use those 3 games one after the other to kind of show how you want to interact with all 3 of those games, those style of games. And then you get into the Olympia game. And I think that's when you kind of want to get the experimentation on system.
Yeah.
And then the Orlando City game, I think my honest opinion is the Orlando City game is just to debut the new pink jerseys. That's all.
Maybe. And honestly, I don't even mind us putting out a second tier team against Orlando City because that Kansas City game is 2 days later, 3 days later. So 4 days later. But still, I'd rather be fresh and ready for that. I'd be very surprised if all the big guns start. I think some of them might get minutes in that Orlando game. but only towards the end and to keep them fresh and ready.
I hope
But
that's
I
how it
don't
goes.
expect them all to start that game. I think we're going to see our second 11 come in that game with Messi and Suarez maybe coming off the bench.
And then February 8th, so that will be the following Saturday. We'll play this upcoming Wednesday, next Sunday, and then the following Saturday against Olympia. That will be, I think, the heart of the preseason that I was talking about, that 3-game stretch.
Mm-hmm.
Any expectations from the San Pedro Sula down in Honduras? It is a stadium that U.S. men's national team fans know all too well as a tough place to play. And I am very curious to see how that interacts, how Inter Miami interacts with that environment. Because I think it'll be sort of a test for going on the road and seeing how you can behave away in CONCACAF, because it is an experience, especially for the guys that haven't done that before.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a tough game as well in terms of the atmosphere and how you deal with that. And I think a really interesting thing about this Americas tour is the fact that the intensity level is automatically brought up by the crowd itself. So the crowd brings in a completely different energy and is automatically the 12th man for the home team. So playing in that cauldron of energy and playing in that environment can really make or break players sometimes. And it's very good experience, especially for CONCACAF, to get that heat of the moment experienced early, so that when we go into the season, when we're playing some of those games away from home in those environments, we know this is something that we can look back on and be like, we played like this before. We played on a pitch like this before where they deliberately, mess it up for us to not have a great game. So those are the kind of intangibles I think that's going to be very important. And I will be really looking forward to dissecting that particular game just for these intangibles and not just what's happening on the pitch in terms of the players and the system.
Yeah, definitely. And we went through this last year in the preseason and during the CONCACAF Champions Cup when we played in Monterrey, but there is something different about playing on the road in CONCACAF. It is just different. And that's in even Canada, anywhere in the Caribbean, Middle, Central America, or in Mexico. It is just different. And I think if you are not used to CONMEBOL International Soccer or Copa Libertadores, like, it is a unique experience for you. And there's a lot of guys on this team that haven't had those experiences, or obviously CONCACAF away. So guys like Kremaski and David Ruiz and Noah Allen, Ian Frey, and Drake Callender, and Oscar, well, maybe not Ustari, but even Jordi Alba and Busquets, like, those guys will learn from this experience. The field is not going to be very good. The ball is going to bounce too high, and the crowd is going to be unpleasant to be in front of. So
on your backs all game.
Great experiences, and I think that's exactly what we're going to see when we go to if we go to Jamaica, if we play in Mexico City against Monterrey, in the Azteca against Club America in Mexico City. Like, those types of games, this is how you prepare for them, by putting yourself in these environments. I think it's wonderful that the team's doing this, and I think it's exactly what you need to get yourself mentally ready for those later games, if and hopefully when we get to them.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, Orlando City, last couple minutes. Any thoughts on that February 14th game before we wrap it up?
If our second string team can get a 5-0 win, I'm gonna have the best week of my life if that's the case. No, honestly, I don't want to say it's a throwaway game, because that just makes it feel like we're not treating it seriously. It's still a preseason game. It's still a game against your rival. So
I'm not taking it seriously.
Yeah, I know, but still, I think this is going to be one of those games where you give your second string team opportunity to go out and get a run. Some players might stand up and be like, I'm going to take this game by the scruff of its neck and actually put on a show. I'd love to see that. If one of our lesser players can actually do that, I would love to see someone like Yannick Bright and Benjamin Kremaski maybe step up and dominate against Orlando City. If they can do that and stake a claim for actually being in the starting 11, that's what I'm going to be looking out for in this game. I'm not going to be too bothered by what the scoreline is or how we play, because there's a game 4 days later that's basically going to set the tone for the rest of the season. So I really want to focus on that game, and this is basically not important for me.
Yeah, I mentioned it. My theory is that they're going to debut the pink kit earlier in that week, put it on sale, and then hope people buy it, and then have that be like the big memory game for that. The the new pink kit. I think similar to you, I think whoever needs extra minutes to get in their legs, that's the game for you to start. But I think we're going to get 10, 15, 20 minutes off the bench from Messi and Busquets just because you want to see, the crowd wants to see him and stuff. But there are so many better ways they could have done this, right? Play San Diego at the Rose Bowl, play LAFC at the Rose Bowl, something like that. Play Columbus in Ohio Stadium, something like that. Like big crowd, big stadium, big environment. This one, I don't think it's going to be there. It's in Tampa Bay. Everyone from Tampa Bay has had a chance to see Messi at this point. If they take the drive down to South Florida or if they take the drive over to Orlando, they've had opportunities to go make that happen if they wanted to. So I hate this game. They're doing it for a reason, and I think the reason is they wanted to do that new kid.
Yeah.
So
that's fair.
All right, Saur. That's the last time we're going to have like a normal podcast episode for quite some time. We're going to be back for the pregame show as always before Wednesday night. And then we'll do our thoughts after. We'll do the same thing on Sunday. Probably a week and a half until we're back on the pod, just talking about Inter Miami in a more general way. So final thoughts on the preseason that we get to look forward to, or anything else on your mind?
Let's get it going, man. I think it's a very well planned out preseason. A lot of good games coming up, difficult games coming up. And I can't wait to see how we back up our performance against Club America. That was a good marker. Hopefully we can live up to that and build on that going forward.
All right, guys, you heard it from Saur. This was the Dry Pink Dialogue, episode number 101. Can't believe we got here. But like always, guys, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful evening, and we will see you in the next one. Hey, everybody, thanks for tuning in. Do us a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. Since our first viewer, sharing this with you all has been the very best part. So from the beginning until the end, thank you for being a part of this, and have a wonderful day.